knee bolsters. They started putting in these big, heavy metal plates underneath the dashboard, right where your knees were. And that's to stop you from sliding underneath the dashboard and getting out of position of the airbag or sliding underneath the seat belts. So we limited the leg movement by putting in these heavy steel plates, which does cause injuries to increase to the knee and legs. But in an accident that's severe, it's saving your life at the expense of your legs, which that's a hard decision to make. Belt buckle switch. These guys usually are an input into the airbag, and it uses it to for deployment rates, and it also uses it to decide whether or not to, you know, put the airbag, deploy the airbag. You can also use what's called a Hall effect switch or a push button switch inside there to tell whether or not the buckle is the belt is buckled. Uh, anyways. All right. So these airbag modules run a continuous diagnostic monitor on and checking for faults. And it collects and processes the impact data to deploy the airbag. This impact data can be retrieved. Interesting side note, the black box that you hear about on airplanes, you actually have one that's inside your vehicle as the airbag controller. Airbags deploy, it keeps a record of how fast you're going, steering wheel angle, whether or not your foot was on the brake, vehicle speed. I mean, G forces. It records all of this stuff, and then that can be retrieved. Now, this control module has to supply some backup power for at least 10 seconds or so to deploy the airbags in the event of a battery or battery cables becoming damaged in the collision before the crash sensors are activated. So these guys tend to hold their power for a while. Now, one of the reasons to work safely around these guys, one of the reasons why you have to be very careful is because these guys could deploy. Although it is highly unlikely with the safeties that are imparted into these things. Unless you do something really stupid, you'll be fine. It's not a big, huge deal. Although you do something stupid and with your head in the wrong spot, it will kill you. So these clock springs, talked about them for a second. It allows the steering wheel to turn and still make contact. It has limits to how far it can go. One of the things you got to really watch for is on a rack replacement. You're replacing the steering rack. Make sure that you lock the steering wheel or disconnect this clock spring. Be very careful because if you spin the wheel too far, you'll literally rip the guts right out of this thing, and it'll be junk and it needs to be replaced. You have to make sure that it's centered when these guys are replaced, so that you got a certain amount of turns lock to lock and that doesn't run out of cord on it. It's kind of built the same way as a retractable hose reel. It's kind of the same mechanism. All right, passenger side airbag cutoff switch. I don't know if they use these anymore, but it used to be a big deal, especially on trucks or someplace without a back seat. You could put the child up in the front. I don't think they allow these anymore, but this would, you could turn the passenger side airbag off, but now they're not doing that. As a matter of fact, one of the things in the passenger presence system is it looks for sub 60 pounds and it'll flash the airbag light on you, or it'll disable the airbag if it's not up to, the right weight in order for the airbag deployment not to injure the occupant. Okay? Anyways, passenger presence systems. Uh, this is used in conjunction with the airbag in order to vary the deployment of the airbag. It's also a go no go for the airbag system. I mean, if it doesn't see any weight on the seat, it doesn't blow off the airbags. Why waste the money in the crash? There's no reason for it. Although it does look at trying to determine the weight of the passenger. Yeah, it looks at how much you weigh every time you get in the car. It knows. Restraints. Uh, Not only the airbags are part of the inflatable bags are part of the airbag system, so are the seat belts. We have these things called pretensioners, and it's literally a charge inside the seat belt, and it goes off before the airbag deploys itself. So, you get into an accident, this thing, like, you know, yanks really hard. This is why people are, like, breaking collarbones when the airbag deploys, or because it grabs a hold of you so hard to put you in the right spot so you hit the airbag. It doesn't want to see you off to one side. It's going to yank you back into the right spot. Okay, so literally it just yanks down on the belt buckle assembly, and these are one use only. If airbag deployment and you're trying to repair a car on airbag deployment, these things need to be replaced as well. Get it? Airbag light. Usually it proves out, so that means it comes on and then it goes off after 3 to 10 seconds. Sometimes they blink, so it'll come on and it'll blink at you a couple times and the airbag light will come on steady. Usually this is a fault indication, and the number of blinks is the code. We okay? I mean, nowadays we just plug in a scan tool, but even on modern vehicles, sometimes that light will blink out the code. Sometimes there's an audible tone as well. And honestly, they have trouble codes. You just need to follow them. But you're not going to get in using just a generic scan tool. You need a really good scan tool in order to get into the airbag system. Connectors. Gold pins, they don't corrode. The other thing they have is they have a shorting bar, and it's right here. So when I disconnect the airbag itself, it shorts out the two wires going into the bag. And what that does is that it's a safety. It stops it from deploying on static electricity because they're both shorted together. As long as I have the same voltage on both sides, it's not going to blow up the airbag. Get it? But you do need to be wary of the fact that they have a shorting bar inside, and being very careful not to disconnect those, because that's when the airbag becomes very dangerous. Okay, so we look at one, and I have my uh, front saffing sensor and my right saffing sensor, and then I have 3 impact sensors. And then here is my airbag. Now this is a 1 airbag guy, but you can tell there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 fuses on this guy, 5 up here, one for a separate backup power supply that's external to the airbag. This is old. Here's a newer one. Okay, so we look at this front end discriminating sensor. There's a certain voltage on here and it drops through a 1K resistor. That gives us some voltage drop. That tells the computer that this line is okay. And then here's my seatbelt switch, and that's just a switch to ground, a ground side switch. You can also see the shorting bars. Here's a shorting bar on this instrument panel. This is the passenger side, and this is the driver's side. Here's my clock spring. It's got a shorting bar. There's also a shorting bar over here on pin 6 and 7. And this is ground, and this is the airbag light up in the dashboard. So if I just unplug this thing, the shorting bar is going to light the light. Get it? And here's another one. So look, we'll talk about some safety stuff when we get into the lab. I'm going to be like showing you how to disarm uh, an airbag system. It's really not that difficult, and how to be safe around them. Realize we've got airbag systems all over the damn car now, so we do need to be careful about where we're working. If I have to replace, take off the steering wheel, or if I've got to, take the dashboard out to replace like a heater core or something, I'm going to be into the airbag system. Some of these cars literally have airbags built into the seats themselves or into the pillar. So care must be taken when I'm like doing something in the pillar, or I'm taking the door apart. I could have crash sensors in there. Typically, the crash sensors are on each side, left and right, and the sapping sensor, that center one, that arming sensor, usually these airbag controllers are center mass of the car. They're at the balance point of the car. So usually that's right underneath the console, usually right underneath, like, right between the two seats, right in the middle. That's usually where they are if you need to go look for them, because that's a good place to pick up the G forces and have the accelerometers pick up, the pitch and yaw of the vehicle on, over cliffs and stuff like you see in movies. Okay, so we'll talk more about this when we get out in the lab. I'm going to show you on R1. I'm going to show you how to disable one. Piece of cake. Just got to look it up.